ground trembled beneath their feet, every explosion sending waves of terror through the war-torn city. Buildings crumbled, their once sturdy structures reduced to rubble as the sky was painted with the dark plumes of smoke. Among the chaos, a young man named Ayman ran, his hand tightly gripping that of his little sister, Layla. She was only 8 years old, her wide eyes filled with a fear that Ayman wished he could shield her from. But there was no shielding anyone from this nightmare. They darted through the debris-strewn streets, dodging falling rubble and leaping over the remnants of a city that once thrived with life. Ayman's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts consumed with one desperate goal: survival. Layla's tiny hand clutched his, her tears mingling with the dirt on her cheeks as they raced through the chaos. Then, in the corner of his eye, Ayman saw her. A car crushed and mangled, its front end buried beneath the rubble of a collapsed building. Inside, a girl about his age was trapped in the back seat, desperately trying to free herself. The front of the car was a mess of twisted metal, where her parents, her father, who had been driving, and her pregnant mother, lay lifeless. The sight was haunting, but the girl in the back seat was still alive, her wide eyes filled with terror as she fought against the jammed door. Ayman hesitated for only a second before making his decision.
"Layla, stay here,"
he whispered, crouching to meet his sister's eyes.
"I'll be right back, I promise. Don't move." Oh.
Layla nodded, too scared to speak, her small body trembling as she watched her brother run toward the wrecked car. Ayman's heart raced as he approached, every second feeling like an eternity with the bombs still raining down around them. The girl inside the car saw him and began pounding and screaming on the window, her cries muffled by the thick glass.
"Stay back!"
Ayman shouted as he reached the car. He grabbed a piece of metal from the ground and, with all the strength he could muster, smashed it against the window. It took several tries, his hands bruising with each strike, but finally, the glass shattered. The girl inside the car flinched as the shards flew, but Ayman quickly cleared the remaining pieces away and reached in to unlock the door. He pulled it open and extended his hand to her.
"Come on, we have to go."
She hesitated for just a moment, her eyes flickering toward the front seat where her parents lay. Ayman saw the pain in her expression, the crushing realization that her world had just been ripped apart. But there was no time to mourn, no time to grieve.
"Please,"
he urged.
"we have to move, or we'll die here."
She took his hand and he pulled her out of the car. They ran back to where Layla was waiting, her small frame huddled against the wall of a nearby building. The girl stumbled as they ran, her legs weak from shock, but Ayman kept a firm grip on her hand, leading her away from the car, away from the wreckage that had once been her family. As they turned a corner, they heard the rumble of military vehicles approaching. Ayman's instincts kicked in, and he quickly pulled both girls into a narrow alleyway, pressing them against the wall. The sound of engines grew louder as the military convoy passed just meters away, the soldiers' faces hardened by war. Ayman held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears as he prayed they wouldn't be seen. Minutes passed like hours, but finally the convoy moved on, leaving the alley in silence once more. Ayman exhaled slowly, his muscles relaxing slightly. He turned to the girl beside him. Her face was streaked with tears, her clothes dirty and torn, but she was alive. They were all alive.
"What's your name?"
he asked softly, trying to offer her a small sense of normalcy in this shattered world.
Reem.
She whispered, her voice trembling.
Reem, you're safe now.
Ayman said, though he knew that safety was a relative term in this hellish war zone. He looked down at his sister, who was clinging to his leg, and then back at Reem.
We need to keep moving. Do you have anywhere to go?
Reem shook her head, her eyes filled with a lost, vacant look that made Ayman's heart ache. She was alone now, just like him and Layla. There was nowhere to go, no one waiting for them. They were all that was left.
Then you'll come with us.
Ayman decided, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides.
We'll find somewhere safe.
They moved cautiously through the city, sticking to the shadows, avoiding the open streets where the danger was greatest. Ayman led the way, his mind racing with thoughts of where they could go, how they could survive. Every step was a risk, every noise a potential threat. But with each step, Ayman felt a growing sense of responsibility, not just for Layla, but for Reem too. He couldn't leave her alone, not after what she had just endured. As night fell, they found temporary refuge in the ruins of an old build. It offered little protection, but it was better than nothing. Ayman scavenged what he could, some canned food, a few blankets, and they huddled together in a corner, the cold night air biting at their skin. In the dim light, Ayman could see the exhaustion on Reem's face, the weight of her loss pressing down on her. He wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but words felt hollow in the face of such devastation. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, offering her the only thing he could, his presence. Reem looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and squeezed his hand in return.
Thank you.
She whispered, her voice barely audible. Ayman nodded, his throat tight with emotion.
We'll get through this.
He promised, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. Days turned into weeks as they moved from one hiding place to another, constantly on the run from the violence that consumed their world. Through it all, Ayman and Reem grew closer, bound by the shared horrors they had witnessed and the desperate hope that kept them going. Ayman found himself drawn to her strength, her resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. And Reem, in turn, came to rely on Ayman's unwavering determination to keep them safe. One night, as they huddled together under a makeshift shelter, Reem spoke softly, her voice breaking the silence that had settled over them.
I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come for me.
She confessed, her eyes searching his.
You would have found a way.
Ayman replied, though he wasn't sure if it was true. He couldn't bear the thought of what might have happened if he hadn't seen her that day, if he had just kept running. Reem shook her head, a small, sad smile tugging at her lips.
No, I wouldn't have. You saved me, Ayman, in more ways than one.
Ayman didn't know what to say, so he just squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't quite put into words. In the midst of all this chaos, he had found something unexpected, something that made the horrors of the world seem a little less unbearable. He had found that one person for whom he could change the world, and it was love. It was a fragile thing, born in the ashes of their broken lives, but it was real. And as they continued to navigate the dangers of their war-torn world, that love became their anchor, something to hold on to when everything else seemed lost. They didn't know what the future held, if they would survive, if they would ever find peace. But they knew that they had each other, and in a world consumed by war, that was enough. The war raged on, but in the quiet moments when the bombs had ceased and the sky was momentarily clear, Ayman and Reem would sit together, their hands intertwined, and dream of a day when the fighting would end. A day when they could build a new life, not just for themselves, but for Layla too. Until then, they would keep running, keep fighting, and keep holding on to the love that had blossomed amidst the ruins. Because in the end, love was the one thing the war couldn't take from them. A day came when they had to sacrifice as chaos of the war spread wider. It was nothing short of a genocide.